Well, hello, everyone.
Good morning.
Yes. So as you can see, we are coming into the chapter called Computer Laws Part 2, whose general focus is a little more on state laws. And since we're living in North Carolina, I thought we'd take a look at one of the chapters in the North Carolina general statutes that is related to computer crime. And you'll see that it is not tremendously detailed, but that said, it does begin with definitions. And hopefully you have ascertained thus far that precision in wording is of primary importance when we talk about codifying things into law. Being able to either prosecute an individual or, on the defense side, exonerate an individual is pinned very heavily on presenting your case as it aligns with the statutes and state and federal laws as they are written. And if there is any ambiguity in that writing, it can be, used as a wedge with the jury or judge or in a deposition in order to, sway minds in one direction or another. So we see in paragraph 14 of Article 60 in the North Carolina General Statutes that the section begins with definitions. And most of these terms are probably things that you and I would guess correctly as far as their meanings, but we also have to consider that there are many out there who are not dipped and rolled in the information technology world, and thus it is very important that the terms are not only explained technically, but they are explained in a type of wording that can be grasped by the general public. So let's just look at the first term, access. And we can see that the definition is, in this context, to instruct, communicate with, cause input, cause output, cause data processing, or otherwise make use of any resources of a computer system, or a computer network. So that said, that probably, covers the bases fairly well. Let me see, I think we have some people waiting in the waiting room. Okay, take care of that. We would have to juxtapose that term perhaps against a denial of service attack. Would that type of attack communicate with the target machine. And in technical terms, yes, because there are synchronization requests being bombarded to the server, and then the whole point behind a denial of service attack is that we are bombarding that server with just a barrage of requests that the server is struggling to address, to the point where it is brought to its knees and not able to do any meaningful work for its intended user base. Authorization, also a very important concept when we talk about computer-related crimes. Here it's defined as having the consent or permission of the owner or the person licensed or authorized by the owner to grant consent or permission to access a computer system or computer network. They tend to use that set over and over again. And an important subtopic of authorization is in a manner not exceeding that level of permission. So all too often, a perpetrator of a crime actually could be intentionally or sometimes even unintentionally, an individual exceeds their level of authorization. They are indeed allowed to access this computer system. Perhaps they're even an insider, but either through curiosity or a malevolent intent, they try to pivot or elevate their permissions to be able to access information that otherwise is not in their purview. So going beyond the designated or granted consent or permission will be spoken about further in this Article 60 of the North Carolina General Statutes. And, you know, I invite you to look at some of the other terms. There are probably several dozen of them that you can take a look at. Some of them are, well, we might consider them to be, you know, technical or computer-ease kind of terms. But if you look further down the list, you'll see property. And property is defined as anything that includes financial instruments, information, including electronically processed or produced data, and computer software and computer programs in either machine readable or human readable form, and any other tangible or intangible item of value. So they really tried to cast a very wide net on their use of the word property. So when we look further in the statutes and that terminology is used, then we need in our mind the mental model of what the definition has been provided in this initial section of the document, because this is also what the lawyers and other defense and prosecutory officials have to rest their case upon. Well, we're not going to read the entire Article 60 today, but you'll see that it is not incredibly long. Really just, about a half a dozen pages past the definitions section. And in fact, I am going to have you read this on your own, because there is an assignment that will be due the coming weekend called the North Carolina Computer Crime Laws, which basically is a template that includes some of the verbiage from the law, and then you just simply need to fill in the information with the facts and responses that you find in the Chapter 14, paragraph 543 or 453. I'm being dyslexic here. It's about through paragraph 460, I believe, in that Article 60. I called out separately paragraph 196, that is in Chapter 14 of the statutes, that specifically addresses cyber stalking. Besides these two sections of Chapter 14, there really is not a lot of other discussion in the North Carolina statutes that relate to cyber crime, although there may be references in other statutes that may be, massaged when we have we'll call a physical world crime that merely has a cyber component. The same way that the RICO law on the federal level, although originally developed to address the organized crime in the physical world, has been, massaged and used quite often to prosecute organized crime activity and racketeering using the cyber resources. Let's perhaps look, whoops. Well, there are also, I'll just draw your attention to this other assignment called Case History and Analysis with Cyber Stalking. And you're pointed to several articles where you will read about the very first law that was put into place in California to codify a cyber stalking statute, and the fact that only a matter of weeks after that law was signed into law, an individual was charged and I believe convicted under that statute. So that also has a due date of this coming Sunday. All right. And we most likely will not spend more than a week on this unit, not because it can't be, fascinating and that we couldn't look at statutes from many other states across our great United States and do some comparative analysis and all kinds of interesting things like that. But there are many, many other units to cover in this course, and I just don't feel we have the time to spend on one topic more than another. Of course, if you have some interesting anecdote to share with the class or with me that I can share with the class, I do welcome that. I have, yes, a short little video, not very long. And I think I'm going to have to unshare my screen. This is always interesting. And then reshare so that the audio works out for us. Okie dokie. Well, here we go. So let's stop the sharing and reshare with sound. And find the right window. Here we go. So this is another TED talk, or TED related, a regional TED talk. The discussion topic is why cybercrime is such a growing threat.
So what we're going to look at is cybercrime, and it's a growing threat. And I'd like to start out by showing you what the upward trend looks like. What we have here is a chart that shows that the number of cybersecurity incidents rose from about 5,500 in 2006 up to over 67,000 in 2014. These are just incidents that hit federal government agencies in the US. Globally, and across all sectors, the number of incidents is estimated to have risen from about 9 million in 2010 to over 43 million in 2014. Now, many cybercrimes are represented by these incidents. And in particular, any crime that steals data, sabotages data, or makes data unavailable. All of those crimes represent security incidents. And then there's a pile of additional crimes that don't fall in that area. And that includes things like child exploitation in cyberspace and also internet scams. The global cost of all these crimes is estimated to be on the order of $400 to $600 billion annually. And that's roughly in the same ballpark as narcotics crimes. So in the remainder of the talk, what I'm going to do is give you 7 reasons why cybercrime has been on the rise. And the first reason is that it pays, it's very easy, and the chances of you getting caught are pretty low. So why does it pay? Well, today, all of our money is online. And in many cases, the criminals will get direct access to our bank accounts, and they will transfer money straight out of our accounts into theirs. In other cases, they will hack into companies like Target and Home Depot, and they will download tens of millions of credit and debit cards. And they will take this information and they will, in some cases, convert it to make counterfeit cards, and then they'll withdraw money from ATM machines from your account. Or they might just sell the card information in the computer underground, or they might just go on a shopping spree at your expense. Now, not all of the crimes are financial. We've also got lots of spies. They're stealing corporate data and government data. And in some cases, there are students who thought maybe they could get better grades by hacking into their school systems. I don't recommend doing that. A couple students in Southern California were recently arrested for trying. And activists have also found that cyber attacks make for an interesting way of protesting. And what you see on the right here is you see one of the first web defacements to have taken place almost 20 years ago now. And somebody hacked the home page of the Department of Justice, and they changed it to read Department of Injustice, and they were protesting something called the Communication Decency Act. Well, in that case, that particular act was eventually ruled unconstitutional. Okay, the second reason why cybercrime is on the rise is that there's just way too many doors, and the number of doors is going up every year. So if we go back in time to the 1940s, when the first computers were appearing, there was just a handful of computers. They were big, they were clunky, expensive, and they were not connected. And there was no cybercrime. In fact, cybercrime didn't start happening until the 60s. Okay, and then it was just, computer crime, it was mostly embezzlement, okay, or people taking sledgehammers to computers because they hated them. So right now, we've got about 3 billion people online, and they are using anywhere from 5 to 15 billion devices. And all of these devices are connected, and all those connections represent doors. And on top of the obvious doors with the connections, most of these devices have vulnerabilities in them. And so that creates backdoors, and somebody's going to find them. Going forward in time, the estimates are that there's going to be 25 to 50 billion devices online in what some people refer to as the Internet of Things, because everything is going to be connected. And those things are, a lot of them, going to have backdoors in them. The third reason why cybercrime is on the rise is that security is just not very convenient. And so if you're like me, you're working away on your computer, you're trying to get something done, and all of a sudden this window pops up telling you you have to do a critical update, or otherwise hackers are going to take over your computer. So do you stop and do the update? Well, sometimes, but maybe not. Right? You put it off. Another example is passwords. So we all know we're supposed to pick good passwords. And I hope none of you are seeing any of your passwords on this list, because these have all been hacked. Whenever a hacker gets into a server and they download the password file, they start cracking them, and these always show up. The recent attack on the Ashley Madison cheating site, these same passwords showed up. And there were some other gems too, like one of my favorites was, quote, "I should not be doing this." And another good one was, quote, "the best password ever." And then a third example here of the inconvenience. This has to do with encryption. So encryption is a really powerful tool. If you encrypt up your data and somebody gets access to it, they can't make any sense out of it. It just looks like gibberish. The problem is it's not very convenient, especially not convenient for communications. Because if you are messaging with somebody else, you have to be using the same kind of encryption. Well, what we have here is a tweet from somebody by the name of Joseph Bonneau. And he had sent an encrypted email to a guy by the name of Phil Zimmerman. And it was encrypted with something called Pretty Good Privacy, or PGP. And Zimmerman had written back saying, "I can't decrypt this. I don't have PGP running on any of my devices." Do you have PGP running on your devices? No, right? I don't either. But what's interesting here is that Phil Zimmerman is the person who developed PGP. To make matters worse, the bad guys are pretty good with encryption. This is an example of something called ransomware. And it's called CryptoLocker, this particular example. And the way you get this on your computer is you open up one of those attachments you're not supposed to open up. And you do not want this on your computer because it encrypts up all your data, and it won't give you the key to decrypt it unless you pay up. And there's a little clock ticking. At the time this screenshot was made, there was about 54 hours left. And that's all the time you have to pay up before your data is gone forever. I think about 500,000 people got hit with that one. Next reason for the rise in cybercrime is that there's lots of flaws in software. This shows there's thousands of new vulnerabilities found in software every year. These are vulnerabilities in your operating system, your browser, your applications. They're all over the place. Even the security products, your antivirus, these things have flaws too. And now this is just software flaws, and there's all the vulnerabilities that come from bad passwords and not doing security updates and opening attachments and all that. The actual largest vulnerability is the human being. Well, this is what happens when a new vulnerability is found in software. Okay, if somebody develops an exploit for it, and then the criminals all start using it, and the attacks skyrocket. They can go up by 5 orders of magnitude. That's 100,000 times. The heart, the bleeding heart there, represents more than just the sad state of affairs. Okay, that's the actual logo of a vulnerability called Heartbleed. And if somebody exploits that vulnerability, they can get your password when you log into a supposedly secure HTTPS site. Now, this vulnerability was found over 18 months ago. As of a couple of weeks ago, there were still at least 200,000 sites out on the internet that had not done their security updates. You do not want to go to one of those sites. Now, as we talked about before, security updates, they're not convenient. Well, it's even worse for companies than it is for us as individuals. Companies have to manage networks of hundreds or thousands of devices. A study by Kina Securities found that it takes companies 100 to 120 days to do security updates on average. But that after 60 days, the chances of the vulnerability being exploited are over 90%. Next reason is that building secure software, let's get rid of all these vulnerabilities, well, it's really hard. So how many of you in the audience have ever written more than, say, 10 lines of code? Right? A whole bunch of you. Okay, what about 1,000 lines of code? Not so many hands. Well, now imagine your devices, they're running tens or hundreds of millions of lines of code. The latest version of Windows is said to have more than 100 million lines of code just by itself. And it's very complex. And believe me, getting it all right is a humongous task. And so it ships with vulnerabilities. And the problem is aggravated because the companies are under market pressure to get to market first. One study found that 79% of companies, they actually ship products with known security vulnerabilities in them. To make matters worse, there's theoretical limitations on what we can do. Fred Cohen showed back in the 1980s that you could not write an antiviral tool that would detect all possible viruses. And then the technology is constantly evolving. There's new stuff coming out, new versions of everything is coming out, and it really is a task like Sisyphus, pushing the boulder up the hill. It goes on and on. Another reason is, now sometimes people intentionally put back doors into products. And this can happen anywhere in the supply chain. A few years ago, a couple of students at MPS, they found 170 products that had malicious code placed in them in some place in the supply chain. Recently, someone found over 4,000 apps on Apple's iOS App Store that had malicious code in them. Now, it's not that the app developers did that on purpose to get you, although there are some that do that too. In this case, somebody had taken Apple's development kit, software development kit called Xcode. They'd taken that and they put malicious code in it and they posted it up on a server in China. And then Chinese app developers would download that version of Xcode, probably because the download times would be faster from the Chinese server. And then all the apps that were developed with that tainted version of Xcode, the malicious code went straight into the apps. So not just to single out Apple here, is that Android phones. Android phones, somebody found that rogue retailers were taking Android phones that were manufactured in China, and they were intentionally putting malicious code in them before they sold them to customers. Okay, and then finally, the seventh reason for the growth in cybercrime here is that there's just shady sites in neighborhoods. And if you visit these sites, you can pick up malicious code, or you might just find yourself in some internet scam or start getting lots of spam or any number of other things that you'd probably rather not have to deal with. So these are top-level domains that I recommend you just stay clear of. .church, .gov, and .mil all have less than 1% shady sites. But it's not just shady sites. The hackers, they attack legitimate sites, and they put malicious code on those sites so that when you visit those sites, you get the malicious code. Sometimes that's called a drive-by download because you don't even have to click on anything. You just go to the site. It turns out that about 4% of the top 1 million websites were found with malicious code that had been hacked onto them. And 1% of ads also have malicious software in them. So what do we do about all this? Well, there's not time to give you any solutions, but let me just say that there's no silver bullet. Okay, we can't just redesign the internet and redesign all our technology and all these gazillions of bytes of code. Okay, and so I like to think of cybercrime as really just part of the problem of crime in general. We can't ever expect to really solve it, and yet we can't give up. It would be dumb to not lock your house or lock your car. Okay, so we have to constantly be diligent, always trying to do better, and control the risk. And let me just leave you with one thing. We need help, okay, in this area. And so there's lots of exciting job opportunities if you're thinking about what you might want to do when you finish all your schooling. We need people that are cybersecurity experts. We need software developers that understand the security issues so they can avoid them. We need cybercrime investigators, computer forensics examiners, and we need people that can educate our legislators so that when they start passing bills, the bills will make sense. And let me just end with one thought. I've been in this field now for more than 40 years, since the very early days. And I can promise you one thing, it is never boring.
All right, well, let me see what's in the chat. What happens when an enterprise takes money from your account without your approval? Well, that is a good question. I will indeed have to research that. It is probably under a federal statute rather than the state, because more often than not, whatever the enterprise is probably has multi-state existence, or what they call I can't remember the word for it right now, but they have a presence in more than one state. So it would be called, under an interstate commerce kind of a clause, which would be a federal jurisdiction, and probably under either the FBI or the Department of Justice. But I'll have to look into that. And going back to the comment, I mean, after watching this 15-minute presentation, if you're not even more nervous than you were before watching it, then I'll be surprised. But going back to the comment about security updates and the fact that we end users sometimes drag our feet and don't keep our systems up to date, because just like the speaker mentioned, the little pop-up that reminds us to install the update happens just right when we're trying to get that Excel spreadsheet ready for our boss, or finish up at a very important memo for upcoming meeting, or our essay that's due in English class. So we procrastinate. That's one thing on a consumer level device owned by a single individual or a family. But factor that up 100, 1,000, 10,000, even maybe 100,000 when you're talking about security updates at the enterprise level. And things are moving toward what we call industrial automation or enterprise automation, because what employee manually, typing at their keyboard to push out new code to computers could even do that in any kind of a expeditious manner? I mean, that's what we're talking about, 120 days. I mean, that's a third of a year to effect updates. So things have to change. Things have to improve in order to maintain any kind of a handle in this ever going conflict, war between, we'll call the good guys and the bad guys. I am taking a course myself right now. And maybe I'll share my screen again. And get rid of that particular one and move to the Networking Academy. And hopefully I can do this in a smooth manner. And just to show you that I too want to keep learning. So I'm actually a student in a class right now called the DevNet Associate course offered by Cisco. And this course focuses on the topic of network automation. And what is network automation? It is the manner that the software developers and the network engineers in the last, decade have, their responsibilities have sort of been morphing together. And in order for the network to work effectively and efficiently, the paradigm has to change. We can't be configuring our networks by hand with people even at graphical user interface consoles using maybe more modern tools, but it cannot be something that is done, you know, a piece at a time by manpower or woman power. It has to be something that can be codified or automated. And that's what this course is about. And I hope to use some of this information that I learned in the course of going through this to add knowledge to some of the courses in our system security program of study. So that's just a little bit, and it is heavily into Python programming using coding libraries that have been developed over years, and using good coding practices that include what they call loosely coupled and highly cohesive. So what does that mean? When we write code, as you probably learn, and if you're taking the CIS 115 course and learning to write in Python, and maybe even advancing on to taking the Java class, that we do not want to write a piece of code that does, 6 things in a single function or method. We would like our code to do one tiny thing and do it really, really well. And then devise an interface for that method or function so that it can be called by other portions of code, perform its function that it's doing really well, and supply back results. And if everything is modularized in that way, then the entire software product that we develop will not only be high quality, but should also be fairly error-free, because each of these tiny little pieces that we develop, we test very thoroughly and make sure that its inputs are proper and it produces proper outputs, and checks for all kinds of oddball conditions and handles all those unexpected inputs in a proper way, and then produces a good result. And if we can rely on each of those tiny pieces to do their jobs and do them effectively and securely, then when we put them all together, we have a higher level of assurance in the whole product that we build. So we got off on a little bit of a tangent there about software development, but it is, as we've learned, the fact that there are backdoors, vulnerabilities, called Trojan horses, or rogue code that has been slipped into otherwise legitimate environments. That's why we are where we are today, in the fact of needing laws to be able to prosecute those who abuse the system. Okay. So let's take a look in the last part of the class here on this assignment. And I happen to have provided the file in both Word document and an Adobe Acrobat file for those that have trouble reading the Microsoft Word format. And you can see that it is indeed a template type worksheet. The first part, definitions. So the goal for you is to refer to the actual statutes that we had up on our screen here moments ago, and find the appropriate section. In this case, it would be the definitions, and then be able to work your way through. Let me try to get everything on the screen at the same time. So computer system means at least one computer or related or connected. We got there we go. Well, at least one computer together with a set of related, connected, or unconnected something. Well, that should be something that we can easily find in the definitions section of the statutes, and then just fill in the worksheet. Okay. So basically, the point, if you haven't figured it out so far, is to more or less compel you to read the statutes and understand them well enough so that you can answer the questions therein. Okay. Does anyone have any questions on what those expectations would be? We can just look down through here and see that we can find the definition for computer system, and then that would probably have the answer that we need to fill in that that particular blank in the worksheet. Okay. So you'll find out that North Carolina laws are fairly extensive in regard to the topic of hacking. And in that chapter 14, specifically in paragraph 454, there's a lot of verbiage on unauthorized access of computers. Specifically, if you look at the very first paragraph, subparagraph A, it's unlawful to willingly, directly, or indirectly access or cause to be accessed any computer, computer program, computer system, computer network, or any part thereof for the purpose of, and then it gives 3 line items, one dealing with devising or executing any scheme or artifice to defraud, and then the second to obtain property or services other than educational testing material. And then the 3 was discussing violation of that subsection and the penalty associated with it being a Class G felony. Yes. And the section is expounded. There's subparagraph A in paragraph 451 that talks about special cases for accessing government computers. And the law also speaks to unauthorized access and addresses viruses and worms as well. And that was an important addition that some other states' laws failed to address. If you refer to your book, then you will be able to look at some of the other states' laws, starting in chapter 4 at around page, around page 100 and mid 130s, I think 131. We talk about all the different state laws, and you'll be able to read about well, many of them: Connecticut, Rhode Island, and then there is a mention of North Carolina law as well. Again, we're not going to go into a deep dive on the state laws, and that's just mainly because I want to get into chapter 5's material, techniques and resources for computer crime, which I think you'll find both interesting and engaging as well. So again, I will go back and remind you about both the assignment about the laws in North Carolina and the case history and cyber stalking assignment as well. Wednesday's class, I may actually spend a little bit of time wrapping up the state law discussion and move right into the next topic, which is techniques and resources for computer crime. Any questions, comments, additional?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I thought somebody else had a question. Did somebody else? Okay. It's just really quick on the capstone, actually. Just really quick question. And that is the thing we turned in yesterday, which was the non-technical summary. Are you going to be able to check that for accuracy so we can see if there's anything we need to adjust before we do the final part of it?
Yeah, I'm going to try to get to that by the weekend.
Okay, so
hopefully before.
when we actually turn in the final thing, are we returning in another final sort of non-technical summary with that?
Yeah, the executive summary, which is typically what a major technical report, starts with, is the executive summary. It will be a modified form of your non-technical summary.
Okay.
Because well, hopefully by the end you'll have more insights, so you'll be able to address those.
Okay.
But you'll also want to use that layman's type language, because the executive summary is usually well, for several reasons. One is, if you ever wrote a incident response report, a scientific paper, or any other educated document, the executive summary is what the individual who just sort of happenstance comes upon your paper will read to see if this particular analysis is something that applies to them or it might be interesting to them. So you want it to be engaging and not too drilled into the details. Okay, it's an overview. And
I guess
it can
get a bit more technical though, right? Because you're including more information.
Yeah, although you still want to, avoid talking about particular directory locations or
Okay,
that, because the second reason is that usually it's the sort of higher level executives and managers that are reading this kind of information. And all too often, even if they were technical in their day, they've been separated from that for such a period of time that it's not, no longer in their, interest level. They're interested more in the business case, in the strategic vision of the particular topic or application. So you want to keep it more into that, why this is important, strategically or in a business sense, rather than the technical details.
okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's more than one person who's in that same class, and that can address their curiosities as well. All right, well, we'll wrap up for today. And if you have a chance to look at those assignments and have any questions, make sure to, either come with those questions on Wednesday or shoot me an email and I will try to address those. So we'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, and have a good one.
Mhm.